We've all experienced it before. Somebody straight up laughing in your face for either a prediction you might have made, a statement you might have said, or even expressing your dreams you had growing up. Whatever the case may be, you wanted nothing more than to prove them wrong. So today, we're going to be taking a look at a few examples where they certainly were laughed at first, but ultimately they ended up getting the last laugh. When Kevin Durant decided to join the Golden State Warriors back in 2016, it shook the NBA world to its core. That was the last thing anyone expected. But apparently, Adrian Wojnarowski had plenty of time to wrap his head around the idea of Durant becoming a Warrior. In fact, he tried to give all of us a heads up several months before it even happened. Back in February of 2016, actual NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski wrote an in-depth piece about how the Golden State Warriors had been planning a pitch to Kevin Durant for months. In addition to that, Wojnarowski called the Warriors the significant frontrunners to sign him. Maybe if we took that report a little more serious at the time, we all could have braced for impact, so we would have been better prepared when the time came. But instead, we just scoffed at the idea of KD signing with the Warriors, as it seemed very far-fetched. And unfortunately for Bill Simmons, his skepticism was recorded for everyone to look back on. As soon as the earth-shattering news broke, somebody dug up an old podcast episode of Simmons reacting to Woj's report back in February of 2016, essentially ripping him to shreds.
I want to talk quickly about Durant. There's a story that came out a couple days ago, and it was Wojnarowski's new website about Durant, the Warriors planning for Durant, and then another article about how they could make it happen cap-wise. I thought that was one of the most ludicrous stories I've ever read. They're not thinking about next year. They're not thinking about Durant. I think it's absurd. I just don't believe it. That is the most idiotic logic I've ever heard. My question is, who's feeding the information? You know, I know we're doing great this year. We have a chance to go back-to-back and go 75-7, but how could we get better? It's just idiotic. What are you talking about? Nobody's having that conversation.
He would then go on to accuse Woj of making it up just for clicks. Now, to be fair, we all pretty much thought the same thing when we first heard rumblings of the possibility that KD might be heading to the Warriors. But looking back, Woj is one of the most reliable reporters in all of sports. Not much goes on in the league without him hearing about it. At the end of the day, Bill Simmons was dead wrong, and he learned that the internet never forgets. Bobby Knight was another person who tried to warn us ahead of time, but we just didn't listen. Or at least the Trailblazers general manager at the time, Stu Inman, didn't listen. Knight essentially declared Michael Jordan the GOAT before he even played a single second in the NBA. He knew what Michael was capable of before almost anyone else, and here's some footage to prove it.
He's the best athlete, he's one of the best competitors, he's one of the most skilled players, and that to me makes him the best basketball player that I've ever seen play.
Bobby Knight coached MJ at the 1984 Summer Olympics, so he clearly knew what he was talking about. But his good friend at the time, Stu Inman, apparently didn't care. Inman actually went to Bob to get his opinion on who they should take, with Portland sitting in the number 2 spot in the draft. Bob insisted that they take Jordan at number 2, but Inman wasn't quite sure because they already had a star shooting guard, Clyde Drexler. So they were strongly considering taking 7'1" center Sam Bowie instead, saying, but we need a center. Fearing that his friend might pass on Jordan, Bob said, so play him at center. But they didn't take his advice, ultimately going with Sam Bowie in the end, which turned out to be arguably the biggest mistake in NBA history. It was as if Stu Inman had a fortune teller as a friend, predicting the kind of player MJ would go on to be. But of course, the Blazers found a way to screw it up. Speaking of seeing greatness before anyone else, back in 2013, the head coach of the Golden State Warriors at the time, Mark Jackson, told every single one of us that he has the greatest shooting backcourt in NBA history, and he said it with his chest. In fact, I actually have the clip right here.
You talk about, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. In my opinion, they're the greatest shooting backcourt in the history of the game. And I'm a guy that's just not throwing that out there. I followed basketball my entire life. I watched the great players. These two guys are absolutely off the charts.
He said that following Game 2 of their 2013 first-round series versus the Denver Nuggets. He didn't stutter at all, but that doesn't mean he wasn't laughed at as a result. People straight up clowned him for saying that, as they thought it was way too early to make that kind of statement. But Jackson didn't care. In fact, he doubled down on his comments even more when challenged.
In April, you said you thought your two guys were potentially the best shooting backcourt of all time. Is that still how you feel?
I didn't say that. I said they are the greatest shooting backcourt that's ever played this game.
And you said this is the greatest backcourt shooting basketball the NBA has ever seen. And people laughed at you. They called you crazy. They said Mark Jackson just talking like that because they're on his team.
It was an easy call for me. And to close that statement, after I made the statement, I said it ain't even close. If you don't believe me, call my bluff.
Steve Kerr might be reaping all the benefits today, but Mark Jackson could see what was coming all along.
Give Coach Jackson credit. For anybody else, anybody believing in us, Coach Jackson did, and he called me and Steph greatest shooting duo of all time, and I mean, that couldn't have come more true, and it's kind of a testament to your ability to read the game. You know, they called you crazy at the time.
Now, Jackson wasn't the only one who believed in them around that time. In fact, Ethan Strauss picked them to win it all before it was even cool to do so. Heading into the 14-15 NBA season, Strauss picked the Warriors to win their first championship in 40 years, which seemed insane at the time. He was one of the few at ESPN who could actually see the Warriors winning the championship in 2015, even going as far as to write an entire article titled "Why the Warriors Can Win the 2014-15 Title," published on October 29th, 2014. This line says, "The Warriors are far from favorites, but look closer and you'll see the championship ingredients." And he opens by saying, "In picking the Warriors to win it all, I have stupidly opened myself up to the obvious criticisms." So it's clear that he was a little embarrassed by that prediction, which is understandable with it being all the way back in 2014 when he made that prediction. Obviously, picking them to win it all during their dominant years isn't exactly what I call going out on a limb, which is why this guy deserves credit for putting himself out there when it wasn't so clear-cut, and wound up working out for him in the end. Now these last three are where people literally laughed in their face. Not too long ago, an old clip went viral showing Giannis all the way back when he was just a rookie, and he had big plans for the future.
I can tell it means something to you. I mean, all of a sudden your eyes light up.
Yeah, he missed. I want the MVP. I want the MVP, yeah.
Now, I know they were probably laughing at the way he said it rather than what he said, but the fact that he felt the need to repeat himself shows that he wasn't joking at all. He was serious.
I want the MVP. I want the MVP, yeah.
You could tell he probably walked away from that interview feeling a little disrespected, even if that wasn't the reporter's intentions. Either way, he went after what he wanted.
Maybe in 15 years, 20 years, maybe my number is up there next to Kareem, Oscar Robinson. I hope I'm there.
Here's Jason Tatum telling a story about how his teacher embarrassed him in front of the whole class, just for saying he wanted to be an NBA player when he grows up.
And then I said, I want to be an NBA player, I want to be the best player in the world. And she said, you know, you need to be more realistic, you know, that's probably not going to happen. And I remember everybody laughing, and then for her to say that and everybody to kind of laugh, you know, that really, it crushed me.
Now, we should give that teacher a little bit of a pass, because what does she know? Your high school coach, on the other hand, is different, because at least your coach somewhat knows your potential, which makes it even worse when they laugh in your face. And that's exactly what happened to Damian Lillard when he told his coach his dream is to play in the NBA.
Coach was like, man, you think you can make it to the NBA? And I was like, yeah. And he chuckled and laughed in my face, bro.
Wow.
He literally like smiled at me in my face, and I was just like, I never forget when he said that. I think from that moment, it was like, I felt slighted.